All right, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, good morning. Welcome to Corridor Connect. My name is Houston Cypress, and it's an honor to be with you today. I had the pleasure of running into a lot of good friends this morning, and I'm looking forward to making some more. Today, I'm joined by some really amazing friends that I've made over the past few weeks. And I'd like to take a little bit of time to invite them to introduce themselves. And after that, we do have some messages that we want to share. Perhaps go into a little conversation. But I think it's also important to hear from you as well. So we're going to make some time after our conversation to have a little bit of Q&A. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear about what you're concerned about. We want to hear your questions for our colleagues here. And let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Houston Cypress, and I'm going to ask my colleagues here to take some time to tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll start at the end and work our way back. We have Mr. Travis Thompson on the panel, Mr. Jim Strickland, Mr. John Nix, and we do have a colleague that was not able to join us, but Mr. Jim Strickland is going to be sharing a message from Alex Johns from the Seminole Tribe of Florida. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce Mr. Travis Thompson at the end and invite him to share a little bit about himself.
Yeah, good morning. Such an honor and a privilege to be here this morning, especially alongside these guys. Some who I haven't known long, some are friends I've known a long time. So my name's Travis Thompson. I wear a few hats. I'm a conservation advocate through a small group called All Florida. I'm a sportsman advocate and hunting guide outfitter with my partner, Matt Pierce. We run PT Outfitters, which we rebranded as Duck Ranch, and it's the largest waterfowl hunting operation in the state. And then I also, for a long time, have run a podcast that at one point was the top-rated wilderness podcast in Florida. It's called Cast and Blast Florida. So we're a number of hats, and just privileged to be here.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite Mr. Jim Strickland.
I'm Jim Strickland. I'm a cattle rancher from Southwest Florida, and we've been here I think we're now in the 7th generation of my grandchild right now.
Thank you, sir. Mr. John Nix.
Good morning. I'm John Nix. I'm a agricultural engineer. More importantly, I'm a cattle farmer also, 4th generation. I'm located up in the east of Gainesville in a little community called Rochelle, Florida. I enjoy the environment. I'm on the same farm that we started in 1901, and we raise cattle and quarter horses, and I just love it. It's a part of my legacy.
Thank you. And again, my name is Houston Cypress. I'm with the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, and I also run a nonprofit called Love the Everglades Movement. Our colleague who's not able to join us today is a gentleman from the Seminole Tribe of Florida, Mr. Alex Johns, and he serves a number of roles for the Seminole Tribe of Florida, but one of his main roles is as the Executive Director of Agriculture. So our friend will be sharing a statement from him earlier. But let's go ahead and dive deep into some of the concerns and some of the passions that we have regarding the land. And so I'd like to invite Mr. Travis Thompson to get us started.
Yeah, I drew the short straw backstage, so I get to go first, right? They got me up here because they told me I could talk about Taylor Swift and stuff, and I was ready for that. So you talk about the challenges for me. I'm not a landowner. So I work with landowners. I'm privileged to be out on the land a lot. But a little more background, I grew up, my dad was an engineer for DEP for 40 some odd years. So I grew up around conservation. It was a thing that was kind of pervasive in our house. And for us, when we went on vacation, we didn't leave the state. I think until I was in my 20s, I left the state like twice. It was all Florida. Everything we did was in Florida. So when we went on vacation, we were snook fishing, we were catching redfish, we were catching trout, we were enjoying the natural resources and the beauty of the state that we have. And you know, during the winter, I was at my uncle's farm, or I was in the deer woods or the turkey camp or whatever. And so everything I did revolved around being outdoors, but the tangible connection for me was through hunting and fishing, like consumptive use. And so, you know, when you ask me about challenges, one of the things that I see is kind of our disconnect from where our food comes from, which I know is a passionate thing for the Beef Association and the cattlemen, but it's also a passionate thing for me as a hunter, as a conservationist, because the tangible touch that you have for wildlife, for wild animals, in using that, the end goal for me as a sportsman is to hunt this animal, right? It's a dead animal. It's similar to the end goal for a rancher, right? They're raising an animal for food. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the conversation because it's less palatable to discuss hunting an animal because we assign them charismatic qualities or whatever. And I'm really passionate about the idea of if we're going to create more conservationists, one of the biggest opportunities for us is in the sportsman's realm. It's in getting people out and touching water and land and these animals and being able to connect with them in a way that generationally we've been doing it going back way beyond my people have been able to talk about. So that's where I think the biggest challenge we have is kind of an acceptance of hunting and moving forward. I'll also add yesterday, Senator Brodeur talked about Aldo Leopold. And we know the 5 tools of Aldo Leopold for land management, for wildlife management. It's the plow and the cow, it's the axe and the match, and it's the gun. And we often leave off the gun in that conversation because of whatever ramifications we're worried about. And I think it's really important we bring that back into the conversation and we start almost celebrating that as a wildlife management tool. If you want more of any species on the planet, we've proven this with Shane Mahoney and Valerius Geist and the North American model of conservation that Zach spoke about yesterday. Being able to hunt and pursue those animals is very important.
Mm-hmm. I've heard so many speakers that said, I can't see you in the audience, which is absolutely true. But this is also true. By the way, the slides are showing a little bit of our land conservation easements, some of our cowboys, and some of our future of cattle ranching in Florida. As you look, you'll ascertain which ones. It didn't used to be this way. I've sat in big auditoriums like this before with cattlemen's groups and said, we're going to prepare you when the enviros come to petition us or picket us or address us in our meetings. We actually 50 years ago had conversations like that with preparation to be able to thwart off what was perceived to be the people in this room. 50 years later, a lot of you are heroes. You're my heroes through the years. You've become my heroes with your passion, with your assistance. Without you, we wouldn't be here. This is just such a stellar moment with what has happened with Florida. But I'm going to give you a little bit of my thoughts and a little bit of insight into what a real rancher thinks on a day-to-day basis. Not just they're a conservation and they own land is what we do. I do believe my grandchild is 7th generation here in Florida. The Strickland family has never achieved any fame or glory. We never passed down any land to each other. Most of it was on leased land with a little bit of land owned in the middle of it. But one thing I can look back and see through the generations that went before me was a true love of what we do, of the land and the cattle. My cattle habit has led me to do a lot of different things just to support it. I went into the international shipping business and shipped cattle from Russia to China to Nicaragua to Oman. And so that supported my cattle habit. I was an appraiser. It supported my cattle habit, but that's what I wanted was to stay on whatever land I had, and a lot of it was leased. I look back and there's approximately 100,000 acres that I have at one point in my life had leased, which is not a cattle ranch anymore, and we know what it is. My father died when I was 17. We had just bought a little piece of property from Ben Hill Griffin. Due to lack of estate planning, he died when I'm 17, and I'm the oldest of 2 children. We had to sell the land, sell the house in North Carolina. I understand what loss is. Truly understand. Along the way, I have collected mentors and partners that we trusted each other, we believed in each other, and through them, I have had the ability to now that we control about 15,000 acres across Florida, a little bit in Georgia and around. But it wasn't me. It was collaboration, like the 200 different disparate groups, but similar groups that are in this audience, that we all came together. I was very fortunate. At some point, we started buying land. It was what now? What's next? And it became a conservation easement. I had done a conservation easement 24 years ago. So I understood. I met some of my heroes. I met Julie Morris. which was really the change in my life and my thought process of conservation. She taught me more about conservation than anybody. She helped us with doing other conservation easements we did on our land. So in 2015, we formed a little group called Florida Conservation Group, and it was science-based with ranchers and scientists, and we advocated for programs that would help ranchers be sustainable. It's morphed into we can also help with conservation easements, but we still advocate, whether it's farm bills, cost share practices. Tallahassee, I spent a lot of time for 7 years in Tallahassee lobbying for funding. So now we're in the thing now to where we actually own a little bit of land, and here's my dilemma. My family has never learned how to pass down land because we never had any. So now I have Ayla Josephine, my daughter, named after Ayla, was the powerful woman in Clan of the Cave Bear. I'm giving you a little insight in my family. We have Sable Eulalie. Sable, of course, state tree. Eulalie was the Indian princess. I have my granddaughter, Quinn Sloan Strickland, goes back to our Scottish heritage. So Julie and I have now planning. We have bought some land. We have purchased some land with easements on it. And whenever you purchase a land with easement on it, you feel like you just adopted somebody's child. Because there was love and there was discussions in the family to figure that out. Where we're going in the future, growth is not going to stop. We know that. I'm not anti-growth. One of the pictures that just slid is one of the futures. The little heart that you see there is, I love this land. When I dug that pond, it's right by our cabins, and I love that land. We've made a heart out of it. Some of the things that I learned along the way is that if we're going to have conservation easements, we're going to have to deal with the public. There's invasive species. There's baseline studies that are done. What are we going to do 500 years from now when we have to burn woods? We live in a pyrogenic state of which things depend on fire. What is this going to look like 500 years from now? What are going to be the issues that those of us ranchers here are going to deal with? It may be 2 cases of foot and mouth disease in the United States of America. We're dead. If that's our income stream, we're gone. If we run into invasive species 500 years from now that we're now responsible for controlling, what are we going to do with a limited amount of money? Because let me tell you, cattle do not make a lot of money. And many times we lose a lot of money, and that's why all of us diversify many different ways. So what we need is research, and that's where you come in. What we need is science. That's where you come in. What we need is funding. That's where you come in. There's 2 great programs in the state of Florida. Florida Forever program, Rural Family Lands program. They need fully funded. We just got $100 million vetoed by the governor. I think he made a mistake, but he vetoed it. What's the next session going to look like? We do have some sustainable funding for Florida Forever, but we need to move on. We need to all pool our resources, pool our lobbyists, have a cohesive ask, because money is going to drive the boat. Whether it's farm bill money, we're now looking at a situation we may close down FSA and NRCA offices that help us, and those of us depend on those cost shares because of a government shutdown and no continuing resolution going on in Congress now. We offer a lot. We need you to analyze what we have. And I won't go into the aquifer recharge and the endangered species habitat and carbon sequestration and all those. You know them better than I, but we need something. One of the things that we look to the future is research and science. University of Florida has done a really great job. If you want to see what Florida looks like, look at Dr. Tom Hochter's 2040-70, 2070-2040 plan, and you'll see an idea of what Florida is going to look like if we don't do something. That, by the way, is one of my cows. Carlton Ward and I took it, and that was a long, long time ago. And that is one of the original cows that trace back to 1521 in the cattle industry starting in North America. I'm going to end with this. There's several books that I love. And one of them is A Land Remembered by Patrick Smith. And at the very end, after we have bought and struggled and suffered and let blood, and people have died around us to try to make a living from the 1800s to now, that we've become successful and we developed our land and we sold our land and we've done all these things. And while the last McIvy is sitting in the little cabin in Punta Rasa down by Punta Gorda, he goes, What have I done, and where have they all gone? I think we need to remember that. Patrick Smith wrote that book 4 decades before that. So he saw, that is the story of Florida, the story of ranchers of which I'm talking about. The other book is I Take This Land. That is written by Richard Powell. It's basically the same book, but it goes back to Audubon and Guy Bradley and the death of Guy Bradley. At the end of the story, the man looks out and he has not only drained the swamp, but he's put water back in the swamp. His last statement is, the birds have returned. That's the story of Florida. That's our stories. The landowners and the cattle ranchers of Florida, that's our stories. Let's try not to have that continuing for the next 500 years.
Appreciate you, Jim. John.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Nix. I'm a 4th generation farmer and rancher. I'm the sole person that keeps our family farm going at this time. I'm located in just east of Gainesville, Florida, in a little community that my relatives, my granddad, my great-granddad, started. The community is called Rochelle, Florida. It's right between Gainesville and Hawthorne off of State Road 20, right at the 234 exit coming out of Micanopy. That is a calm place for me. As Jim just said, we have to find places that bring us home. And I spent 35 years going to school and then working in South Florida. But at the same time, while doing that, I always came back and been a part of my family farm. The farm started in 1901. We started as a row crop farm, and we leased land from the timber company surrounding us. And we ran woods cattle, about 300 woods cattle. That's where I developed this love for horses and the outdoors. And over the last 60, 70 years, I've seen this woodlands just completely change. Alachua County has changed quite a bit in how it uses its forests. We have a wood burning plant there. It started out as burning refuse from timber companies. And then it went into taking down our oak trees and chipping them up. So clear cutting was something that just changed the way that I saw the woods from the time I was a boy. And I saw the connections between changing one thing and how it has the repercussions of changing everything. And we saw it from the way the animals behaved, to the way the water flowed, to the way the trees grew. So we have to make sure that we understand how the environment fits together. And when we change one thing, we change a lot. So on my farm, I basically now do grass-fed beef. And I have a connection, as you saw in one of the pictures, with my animals. It's just not a business, or it's a passion for me. Jim and I were talking about having cow fever, cattle fever, where you actually work a job so that you could support your habit of running cattle. And horses. I told him I had even an extra one because I threw in horses with mine. So we love the land. Some of the challenges that we run into now as a small farmer is making sure that we can stay profitable. Many of the agencies that Jim mentioned help a lot in maintaining programs that we can take part of and make our farms profitable in today's age. One of the last issues that we ran into in Alachua County was trying to have a meat packing plant. And it was amazing how many people came out against it. So local food and the providing local food was a very, very concern. And it came out in the pandemic very much because we didn't have this big distribution system. We bring most of our beef. We don't have a lot of slaughterhouses in Florida or packing sheds in Florida. So we send out our meat and we bring it back, which is really sustainable, not very sustainable. So there was a big push to have our much as local food as possible. But there was quite a bit of opposition from a couple of sides. There were people that thought that we should be moving to a plant-based society rather than a meat-based society. There were people at animal rights that said that we shouldn't be slaughtering cattle. So as ranchers, as people that understand how the circle works, it's very important for us to get out and tell our story too, to make sure that even from a carbon standpoint, we had to explain that pastures, we don't turn our pastures over, and grass and pastures are great sources for carbon sources, and that the ranchers, the farmers, the ranchers that have pastures and don't turn their grass over are great carbon sources. So educating the public on the sustainability of what ranches are doing and is very important. I work, another challenge is to make sure that our next generation have a love for the land also. So one of the things that I do with my farm is I bring kids out as part of a program to introduce them to the environment. I work for our Alachua County school system, and I'm an energy engineer for them. And part of what I do on outreach is I bring the kids out and let them experience nature, let them touch it. And when you touch something, it becomes real. And that's what we're trying to make sure that that next generation will continue to love the environment and love the land. And by bringing them and exposing them, especially our urban kids that don't get a chance to get out and see these things, that it makes it a big difference. I have a picture there of me with one of my favorite cattle, and that was a opportunity to bring people out and show them some of the things that we do at our farm. So the next challenge is to make sure that next generation really gets the connection, not just seeing it, but touching it and feeling it and making sure that they too develop a love for the land and for the environment.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. And friends, we did wanted to make some time to hear the message from our friend Alex Johns. So I'm going to ask my friend Jim to share his message.
Alex is a friend of mine, and I've always thought extremely highly of Alex. Besides being a Native American, he's a businessman, he is a woodsman, he's a horseman, he's a cattleman, he's a smart man. Alex and I used to race horses together, speaking about John, down at Hialeah Racetrack for about 5 years. He and I did quarter horse racing down at Hialeah. Yeah, you get a lot of insight into people whenever you sit around a campfire. So this is in Alex's words. I want to apologize for missing such a great event as this. A little background on my heritage is that I am a Seminole tribe member and a lifelong resident of Glades County, Brighton Indian Reservation. I've worked for the Seminole tribe for over 25 years. My career with the tribe has been in agriculture, and I am the current executive director of agriculture for the Seminole tribe of Florida. The tribe has a long history with Florida and the cattle industry. We claim to be the very first people to interact with a cow in the United States of America when Ponce de Leon arrived in Florida in 1521. Long before that, we have interacted with the Florida environment and wildlife. My people were able to not only survive, but thrive in the heat and humidity of the Florida landscape. We have a close bond with the wildlife that exists in our unique subtropical climate. Many of these animals have been utilized not only for sustenance, but as ceremonies for the millennia. We go to great lengths to make sure we respect and enhance the landscapes that we have been fortunate enough to hang on to or acquire over the span of many decades. We know the land is only as healthy as the hands that touch it. Healthy land means healthy animals, and healthy animals means healthy people. There's great importance in maintaining land connectivity for wildlife to travel. Animals that become landlocked within small areas are destined to perish. Maybe the Carolina parakeet and the ivory-billed woodpecker might come to mind. The Seminole tribe were migratory, just as the animals are today. It is up to all Floridians to do their part, however great or small, to help maintain the wildlife corridor in Florida. My hope for this event is for each of us to gain a better appreciation for the wild Florida that desperately needs our protection. The challenges are great. The human population growth must be slowed, and the wildlands and green space that are still intact need to be protected forever from future development. We all can make a difference. Find your path and take a stand. I want to end with words of our great war leader, Osceola. For we have promises to keep and miles to go before we sleep. Some of you may think, I've heard another quote like that. This would be the first one. And this is from Alex Johns to all of you. He shows the resilience of the tribe, the courage of the tribe, the sustainability of the Native Americans that have been one with the land. So his words to you today are Madu. Madu. In Creek, that's thank you. And that's from Alex.
Thank you very much for sharing Mr. Johns' words. Mr. Nix, I know there was some things that you wanted to share about our connection to the land, because Alex Johns' words was, I think, really talking about our relationship with the land and that long-term connection that we have, right, over the years that sustain. But I think some of the concerns that you had were about people losing the land, the people that need to be keeping that relationship, that ownership, that caring for the land. Can you talk a little bit more about your concerns for that?
Yeah. Well, one of the largest group of people that's losing their land, farmland, are black farmers. A lot of the, from the 1920s there to now, black farmers there were about 900,000 black farmers. Now there's only 38,000. So we've lost from 15 million down to about 2.5 million acres of land. A lot of this group of people lost their land a lot because of federal policies that were discriminated toward them. They had the Pickford Act, as many of you might know, in 1999, where the government basically said that there was a lot of racism toward giving out funding for keeping land. And a lot of the black farmers lost their land during that time because they could not afford to stay on the land. So one of the organizations that I work with is called the Black Farmers Association. And what we try to do is a couple of main things. We want to make sure that black farmers can not only survive, but strive. Make sure that the land is profitable, because the next generation is not going to stay on the land if they can't make money. As Jim alluded to, sometimes I work in order to take care of my cattle. So, I take another job so that I can take care of the farm because I love it. But we have to make sure that that next generation can be profitable. So part of what we do with the Black Farmers Association is make sure that farmers know what programs are available to them, that they understand what techniques, new farming techniques they can use. We work a lot with NRCS, We make sure that programs are available. So we want to make sure that that segment of agriculture stays involved. As I said, we've lost 70% of the acreage that we used to have from 1910 up to now. So we went from 15% of the farmers down to 2% of the farmers being black farms. So that's a segment that I'm working with and educating and making sure that they understand the value of staying on the farm and the legacy of farmland. So that's a big passion of mine right now.
Appreciate you, sir. I'm going to pose one more question to our panelists and see if they want to comment. And after that, we're going to open up to Q&A from you. We want to hear from you. We want to have a conversation with you. So think good about your questions, please. But gentlemen, I just wanted to see if you have anything that you want to propose or offer to us as we look ahead to the future. Perhaps how we're going to gift these legacies to the next generation, or perhaps something that gives you hope.
Let me take that. Only because I've got another great group of ranchers, attorneys that are very learned, that have done multitudes of conservation easements. They're going to be in breakout sessions today. So I actually have Kate English, one of my heroes. She and I run a think tank together in Washington for a while, and she is a landowner, a large landowner, an attorney, a land use, and has assisted in many, many conservation easements. We have Cliff Coddington from Longino Ranch, one of the most diversified easement holding ranches there is in South Florida. We have Ben Williams, which is a eco-hero up in Northwest Florida. We also have Jimmy Wall, that's coming from Highlands County, that's done a multitude of ranches. So that's I'd rather them tell the story to you than me try to tell you that story. That's a lot of them.
I'd like to offer just a little bit more to that before we get into a question. We'll run out of time, but I think there's something in this conversation, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like we're almost sometimes stopping short of what happens next. Jim talks a lot about the 500 years, what's it gonna look like? And I think we talk a lot, we're kind of in a land race in Florida today. We all recognize that, we all know that. At the same time, the use of that land and how you continue to generate revenue on that land, we've all had conversations privately, and I've had conversations with many of you about that. And that's, again, a reason we talk about payment for ecosystem services. You know, we want to get money for gopher tortoises or panthers or whatever. It's a conversation that I think, I'm really passionate about this particular topic, why we don't talk about hunting as a revenue source on so many of these lands. Because hunting is not just a revenue stream as far as what the landowner makes, it's also a revenue stream for the state for conservation funding writ large, with also a federal reimbursement there. So I think it's something that we can do better on in a conversation moving forward. And if we want to create conservationists, which is a thing I talk about a lot. You know, I go in some rooms and I talk to an environmental group about hunters, I go into a hunting group and I talk about environmental things. If we want to create conservationists, we've got to be looking at access to these properties. You know, it's not simply we create these easements or we create these private lands and they're protected and they're in conservation, and that's incredible. We also have to be talking about ways to connect people to those lands, because if we forget people, we lose the whole soul of conservation. And I think that's an incredible idea that we can't lose track of.
Appreciate you very much. And just a final thought before we open it up to the audience. It just reminds me of something a friend of mine said, that without access and without use, we cannot have conservation. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is very critical is the connection of people to the land. And as we move more into the urban society, many of the kids and many of the people that live in urban America don't understand where their food comes from. They don't make that connection. So the more we as people of the land can bring them out in our parks, in our facilities, and let them know the connection of the environment, especially at a young age. And that's why many of the programs that I do with the Alachua County Schools deal around gardening. It deals around where the food comes from and why it's important for them to understand and make sure that they get good quality food. We have many what we call food deserts in some of the cities. And part of this is because we don't have good, healthy food. But one of the things that has really stimulated interest, I think, even in urban America, is the healthy standpoint. We don't have people coming from the farm as much now, but we have people interested in food and interested in where their food comes from because of health issues. And I think that stimulates a great interest that we can build upon to have people be interested in where and how the food comes from, and then making sure that the soil, water, and air is good, because those all are inputs into their food.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you very much to our panelists and for all the things that they've shared. And now I want to open it up to a conversation with yourselves. Do we have anybody that wants to ask a question or comment on what you've heard? Please feel free to step up. And when you do, tell us your name and where you're from. Do we have any volunteers? It's so hard for me to see past the lights. Tell us your name and where you're from.
Hey, Carrie Guerin from Gainesville. Mr. Nixon, as I was talking with you yesterday, in southern Italy, in southern Europe and Italy, agro-tourism is supported, businesses that qualify, is supported by the governments. And I think we need something like that here in the United States. A lot of CSAs promote festival days where they bring people out for you-pick'ems and things like that. Is there a coalition that can lobby for promoting for state support?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Who can lobby for state support for agro-tourism and operations like that? Do y'all have any advice on the matter?
We have a large agritourism organization here in Florida, and it's becoming very, very popular. There's a lot of vineyards, a lot of farms that have to be ag-based, but at the same time they can offer events at their property. Like, people love to come out to farms and ranches and do and have weddings. We offer days where people can come out and actually taste some of the food that they're actually buying. So that is it is a very important and very growing part of Florida agriculture right now. We do have a Florida Tourism Association in Florida right now.
Excellent. Thank you. We have time for maybe one more question. Looks like we got somebody up front. And remember to tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm T.H. Culhane from the Patel College of Global Sustainability at USF Tampa and the Rosebud Continuum Eco Science Center in Land O'Lakes. And my question's about ways of hunting that would appeal to a broader constituency in the sustainability dialogue, particularly the idea that many of indigenous groups throughout history, throughout the world, tended to improve the yields, improve the stock by taking out the weak, taking out the elder animals, making sure that the stock improved, whereas a lot of so-called Western hunting was getting that prize buck who was the healthiest. What is your impression on that, and how we can actually use the bow, the gun, the other weapons in order to improve the sustainability of wildlife here, rather than culling the best animals, which seems to be the hunting ethic that we've adopted here?
I'll do the best I can in 45 seconds that we got, because that's a big question. I'd love to talk to you offline about it. But I think that happens more than gets discussed. And I think we probably do a lot of everything that we do around the corridor. You listened to Carlton yesterday, you listened to Clay Henderson. A lot of everything that we're doing is storytelling. And Matt and I talk about this all the time, the idea of storytelling around hunting, around ranching, around land, around water. We need to do a better job with that. And so I think in the hunting community, that's pervasively what you see. However, that's not what's promoted necessarily by brands, by organizations, et cetera. So I think we could do a better job with that and probably tell that story a lot better. And how about that for 8 seconds left?
Thank you very much, everybody. I think this has been a great opportunity to hear about the stories from hunters, from ranchers, from farm owners, and from indigenous people. And I think finally that as an indigenous person, I think that so much of the stories that we tell is about the culture that we create, the relationships that we have with the land. The land is the source of our culture. And so I want to say thank you very much to Jim, to Travis, to John, and to our friend who wasn't able to be here with us today, Mr. Alex, for sharing so much of their stories. And thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from your stories the rest of today. Have a great conference, and we'll see you later.